Forget international borders. The most fiercely contested territory in America is often the 6 feet of manicured lawn separating you from your neighbor. That invisible line is a front line where common sense goes to die, and petty creativity thrives. This is a collection of stories from that front line, where disputes aren't settled with handshakes, but with mozzarella-scented cannons, weaponized Christmas lights, and passive-aggressive lawn art. Here are 49 arguments that prove good fences don't just make good neighbors, they make for incredible stories. 1. Some neighborhood disputes involve overgrown hedges. In Salt Lake City, it involved a 47-page spreadsheet. A resident, apparently with an abundance of time and a shortage of tolerance, meticulously logged every single shriek from the kids playing tag next door. But he didn't stop at data entry. He created and delivered an itemized invoice, billing the parents $5 per screech. The parents, rather than writing a check for what amounted to the price of their children's happiness, countersued for defamation of playtime. When the case reached a judge who was likely questioning all his life choices, the verdict was simple. He ordered the man to buy earplugs and find a hobby that didn't involve monetizing the sounds of children having fun. 2. Down in Orange County, a plastic surgeon launched a bizarre crusade against his neighbor, a yoga studio owner. The complaint? Incense from the studio was wafting over and giving his prized koi fish a state of synthetic serenity, presumably making them too lazy to be status symbols. Unwilling to own a pond full of finned-out slackers, he hired an aromatherapist to deploy counter-fragrance pellets into the water. The koi, now caught in a fragrant turf war between Nag Champa and whatever ocean breeze is, swam in confused circles, having a full-blown existential crisis. This proved once and for all that in Southern California, not even the fish are safe from the relentless pressure to maintain a specific lifestyle brand. 3. Your Christmas decorations might be a bit much when they start getting flagged by federal agencies. In a Phoenix suburb, 2 neighbors became locked in a holiday lighting arms race so intense that NASA's official Twitter account posted, "Why is Phoenix glowing?" This wasn't just a few extra strings of lights. This was mutually assured decoration. One home was powered by an industrial-grade gas generator, while the other countered with a solar panel array that would make a small country jealous. Their combined electric bills could likely fund a mission to Mars, but their blinding holiday spirit was officially bright enough to become a navigational point for astronauts in low Earth orbit. 4. In a move that could only happen in Kansas, the weekly tornado siren test was hijacked and turned into the world's most high-stakes battle of the bands. 2 households hacked the city's emergency alert system to broadcast their dueling musical tastes across the entire town. One subjected the populace to heart-wrenching country ballads, while the other fought back with face-melting 80s power rock. The city's official emergency log showed alerts for severe weather imminent, were immediately followed by entries like Eye of the Tiger and Take Me Home Country Roads. While local meteorologists were on their knees begging for mercy, you have to imagine someone at Spotify was watching the whole thing unfold with a spreadsheet and a grin. 5. Leave it to 2 Boston professors to turn a simple property line into a battleground for intellectual property. The neighbors, both academics, would lean on their shared fence while brainstorming. Soon, a cold war of passive-aggressive accusations began, with each claiming the other was stealing their fence-side epiphanies for lectures. The feud escalated to the point where they were demanding footnote royalties from each other. The real victims are their students, who are now forced to formally cite The Fence 2025 in their term papers. Meanwhile, the university's tenure board is developing migraines trying to decide if the fence itself is now eligible for tenure. 6. In a Silicon Valley suburb, a crypto miner publicly accused his neighbor's energy-intensive jacuzzi of causing hash rate hiccups in his mining operation. To prove his point, he published blockchain-verified evidence of what he termed hydrothermal sabotage. His solution was to offer to pay his neighbor in Dogecoin if she'd simply bathe during off-peak hours. Her response was a masterclass in analog revenge. She promptly drained the hot tub, filled it with ice, and began hosting viral TikTok cold plunge parties, all while streaming them using his stolen Wi-Fi. It was a beautiful, low-tech checkmate to a high-tech problem. 7. A culinary war erupted in Baton Rouge when a gumbo traditionalist accused her new vegan neighbor of committing cultural dilution by okra misuse. This was a line in the sand. The vegan neighbor didn't argue back. She unfurled a 10-foot banner from her porch that boldly proclaimed, "Gumbo evolves." The standoff led to a porch cook-off, live-streamed by local news because of course it was. The result was a compromise stew so bizarre it managed to offend the purists on both sides of the argument, while being surprisingly delicious to everyone else who just showed up for free food. A true masterpiece of mutual culinary disappointment. 8. Political sign warfare in Washington, D.C. is nothing new, but one feud transcended the usual partisan squabbles. One lawn became a real-time electoral data feed, with professionally printed signs updated daily with the latest poll numbers. The neighbors' counterattack was an act of pure genius. They put up signs with large QR codes. Pedestrians, expecting links to scathing fact checks or policy critiques, were instead redirected to an endless playlist of cat videos. It became a local phenomenon, with stressed-out congressional staffers making detours just for a moment of relief, proving the only reliable path to bipartisanship is paved with cat memes. 9. In a quiet Alabama suburb, the crack of dawn is announced not by roosters, but by the roar of two retirees engaging in zero-turn lawnmower duels. This wasn't simple yard work. It was choreographed warfare, with each man carving intricate patterns into his lawn, claiming his design achieved optimal grass morale. After weeks of this turf war, City Hall stepped in. Their solution was a masterstroke of bureaucratic peacemaking. They instituted Apology Mowing Tuesday, a mandatory event where the two rivals must manicure the municipal medians together. The grass there has never looked so impeccably trimmed or so deeply burdened by their shame. 10. One misty Vermont morning, an artisanal maple syrup producer declared war on his Airbnb hosting neighbor. The accusation was pure 21st-century villainy. He claimed the host was luring away his customers by piping synthetic pancake aroma through industrial diffusers cleverly hidden in the shared hedge. He called it olfactory piracy and insisted it was costing him thousands. The dispute ended up in mediation, where a deal was hammered out. The exact terms remained confidential, but witnesses reported both parties left the room smelling of a compromise and being, as one person put it, unapologetically and profoundly sticky. 11. Chicago's Sacred Pizza rivalry found a new, terrifying front on a quiet residential street. A deep dish loyalist, finally snapping, constructed a mozzarella-scented yard cannon that would puff cheesy vapors across the property line, directly onto his thin, crust-loving neighbor's porch. The retaliation was swift and equally aromatic. A network of automated garlic oil misters was installed, creating an invisible yet formidable flavor wall. The local mail carrier began reporting hunger-induced hallucinations on his route, and while the war ended in a stalemate, both neighbors gained about 10 pounds of delicious, stubborn pride. 12. Trash day in an Ohio neighborhood reached a new level of passive-aggressive artistry. One resident, perpetually annoyed by his neighbor's overflowing bins, didn't complain to the city. He curated an exhibition. Every offending garbage can left on the curb too long was adorned overnight with a pair of giant, expressive, googly eyes and handwritten signs reading, "Feed me less," or "I feel bloated today." The local raccoons treated the art with the same indifference they showed property taxes, but the message was received by the neighbor, who now brings his cans in with record speed. 13. Picture Portland at 3 a.m., where two distinct aromatic plumes wage a silent war over a single fence. From one yard billows the virtuous steam of organic kale. From the other, the seductive smoke of a mesquite brisket. This nightly battle of the dads resulted in multiple HOA fines for olfactory assault. But the true victims in this lifestyle clash were the local squirrels. Now smelling of a confusing fusion of barbecue and superfoods, they were seen having tiny, existential crises on power lines, no longer sure of their place in the world. 14. A sudden and frankly biblical iguana invasion in a Fort Lauderdale community was blamed on one man's flourishing tropical fruit trees. The aggrieved neighbor installed an array of miniature "Do Not Feed the Dragons" signs. The fruit tree owner, rather than backing down, escalated. He built tiny, elaborate tiki bars beneath the trees, complete with little bar stools and umbrellas for the reptiles. The iguanas took to lounging like sunburnt tourists, and the local kids, seeing a business opportunity, began charging admission and selling lukewarm sodas, inadvertently funding their entire school's next field trip. 15. In a conflict so petty it's almost beautiful, two Milwaukee craft cheese hobbyists accused one another of industrial espionage over identical wax patterns on their cheddar wheels. With no other recourse, they appointed their deeply bewildered mail carrier as the judge for a blind taste test. After thoughtfully sampling both entries, his official verdict was that they both tasted faintly of existential dread with a lactose finish. They have since settled their differences and are now the proud co-owners of a farmer's market stall called Passive-Aggressive Dairy. 16. A Brooklyn writer, slowly losing his mind from the constant clucking of his upstairs neighbor's rooftop chicken coop, channeled his rage into art. He recorded the poultry sounds and released a critically acclaimed poultry noir audiobook. The coop's owner was not flattered. He filed a cease and desist for the unauthorized commercial use of his rooster's dialogue. The dispute was settled when the writer agreed to pay royalties in the form of high-quality chicken feed. The audiobook now comes with a coupon for a dozen eggs, and the hens enjoy a level of literary fame they can never possibly appreciate. 17. When a rare snowstorm blanketed Mobile, Alabama, one retiree saw not a winter wonderland, but a blank canvas. Armed with spray paint, he decorated his neighbor's pristine lawn with a flock of cartoon turkeys. The neighbor, a man of action rather than art, retaliated by unleashing a leaf blower to construct a monolithic wall of snow between their properties. Peace was inadvertently brokered by local kids, who discovered the wall was the most epic sled ramp in the city's history, their joyous screams finally melting the icy feud. 18. An Atlanta-based collector of rare Prince vinyl delivered a formal invoice to his neighbor, a weekend DIY enthusiast. The charge? Depreciation of a priceless record due to sympathetic vibrations caused by Saturday morning hammering. He calculated the damages on a per-hammer strike basis. A week later, a package arrived in response. It contained no apology and no check. Inside was a pair of industrial-grade earplugs and a thoughtfully curated mixtape titled Power Tool Rhythms Vol. 1. The invoice was never mentioned again. 19. On opposite sides of a duplex in the Pacific Northwest lived two rival coffee roasters, and their alley became an aromatic border crossing. Each installed a powerful exhaust chimney. One wafted the light, floral notes of a single-origin Ethiopian bean, while the other blasted the rich, smoky scent of a dark Italian roast. Local joggers reported that running through the alley felt like being teleported between continents in 3 seconds flat. The phenomenon became so famous that both businesses earned 5-star Yelp reviews for their exceptional aromatic border control. 20. In a Tallahassee suburb, the quest for TikTok fame took a messy turn when two groups of teens built dueling slip-and-slides. One team, aiming for the eco-conscious influencer market, used biodegradable soap. The other, going for pure shock value, opted for several gallons of bargain bin gravy. The inevitable happened when a gravy-soaked slider lost control and launched into a prize-winning rhododendron bush. The city eventually fined both households for unlicensed carnival activity. But the real punishment is the faint, greasy stain on the lawn that still haunts neighborhood lore to this day. 21. A coastal Oregon glassblower became convinced his surf shack neighbor was siphoning precious heat from his furnace by strategically leaving windows open. His response was not a conversation, but an act of artistic vengeance. He constructed a massive wall of empty wine bottles that, when hit by the afternoon sun, refracted the light into what can only be described as psychedelic death rays, scorching several unattended surfboards. When the insurance claim was filed, the incident was officially ruled an act of artisan, which is apparently a legal way of saying too weird to prosecute. 22. When a vinyl-sided house was painted a shade of purple so offensive it violated the laws of physics, the neighbor responded with quiet, cemetery-grade snark. A fake tombstone appeared on their lawn overnight, bearing the simple inscription, "Here lies good taste." Not to be outdone, the owner of the purple monstrosity retaliated by deploying an entire squad of those wacky-arm inflatable tube men. The spectacle became so bizarre that passers-by began tipping them like street performers, and the feud just roll-waved on into infinity. 23. As a form of revenge for a perceived parking spot snub in Milwaukee, one resident meticulously tuned his car horn to perfectly match the frequency and tone of his neighbor's doorbell. He would then honk it twice a day, triggering Pavlovian dashes to an empty front door. This campaign of psychological warfare continued for weeks until the victim, in a moment of doorbell-induced panic, drove over the perpetrator's prized tulip bed. The horn fell silent, but so did the tulips. It was a true tulip massacre. 24. In Anchorage, a monumental snow fort became the subject of an intense property dispute. One man claimed squatters' rights by placing a lawn chair inside, declaring it his sovereign territory. The other, refusing to recognize his claim, hitched the entire fort to his ATV and relocated it 6 feet to the north. An emotional displacement lawsuit was filed, but ended up melting much faster than the spring thaw, proving that Alaskan law has very little patience for arguments over temporary ice structures. 25. Two Montana ranchers got into a bitter feud over whose cattle mooed off key at dawn, allegedly ruining the ambiance for their morning podcasts. One installed a series of vocal training speakers that broadcast pitch exercises across the open range. The other fought back by fitting his prize steers with high-end noise-canceling earmuffs. The result was a herd of cattle that hummed vaguely like a barbershop quartet made of robots, and absolutely zero improvement in the quality of either man's podcast listening experience. 26. "You're stealing our breeze," was the bizarre accusation leveled by a Minneapolis couple against their neighbor, whose new small wind turbine was apparently hogging all the good air. Their solution was not to consult a scientist, but to purchase several truck-sized industrial fans to blow the air back onto their property. After receiving a 4-digit power bill the next month, they reluctantly conceded that physics, unlike the wind, is not something you can just steal back. 27. A late-night dispute between two Albuquerque python owners centered on whose snake was hissing above the acceptable decibel level after 10 p.m. First, sound meters appeared on their respective porches. Then, acoustic foam partitions were erected. The feud peaked when one owner was seen fitting his snake with a tiny, knitted silencer sleeve. Animal welfare officers were eventually called, who had to gently explain that snakes do not, in fact, care about mufflers. The owners now attend weekly feeling circles to foster detente. 28. In rural Idaho, two heavily armed preppers began a cold war over whose underground bunker ventilation system was sucking in the other's campfire smoke. The conflict escalated to them installing dueling periscope cameras to live-stream the alleged airflow crimes to a private server. In their paranoia, they forgot to password protect the stream, unintentionally revealing their secret, multi-ton canned peach inventories to the entire world. Local stores reported that tinfoil hats had sold out countywide within hours. 29. When a Los Angeles homeowner built a rooftop pergola that partially blocked his neighbor's multi-million-dollar sunset view, the aggrieved party retaliated in the most LA way possible. He hired a Skybanner plane to fly past every evening spelling out, "You blocked the money shot." The pergola owner responded by installing a fleet of inflatable tube dancers that waved manically during every golden hour. Local Instagram influencers are still fiercely debating whose backdrop was ultimately more iconic. 30. In Savannah's historic district, a preservation purist filed a 30-page aesthetic impact complaint because the family next door hung. God forbid, LED Christmas icicles. The response was not a letter, but an invasion. A flock of neon pink flamingos wearing Santa hats appeared on the lawn overnight. The Preservation Board, facing an unwinnable war, finally issued a ruling classifying the flock as temporarily interpretive statuary, complete with footnotes on acceptable twinkle density for the holiday season. 31. A Fort Lauderdale dog groomer decided to dye several client poodles in rainbow colors for Pride Month. Her conservative neighbor immediately countered with a giant banner reading, "Keep Fur Natural," and began blasting karaoke sermons from his porch. The groomer responded by adding glitter top knots and a confetti cannon to her repertoire. The local news covered the sparkling standoff, and the rainbow fur trend skyrocketed on pet fashion TikTok, proving that you can't fight fabulousness with off-key hymns. 32. An Austin film buff loved projecting public domain sci-fi movies onto his garage door for the neighborhood to enjoy. However, his neighbor, an indie film director, claimed the light bleed was ruining the moody atmosphere for her deeply personal auteur thriller. She retaliated by counter-projecting abstract, moody shadows onto his film, which surprisingly stole the audience's attention. Now, cars double park on the street every weekend to experience the accidental drive-in double feature. 33. A post-Mardi Gras dispute over bead etiquette exploded in New Orleans when one resident installed a pneumatic bead cannon to fire his leftover beads into his neighbor's yard, claiming it was for temporary off-site storage. She responded not by throwing them back, but by meticulously hot-gluing every single bead into a kaleidoscopic mosaic all over his front steps, creating a permanent, treacherous glitter minefield. Tour groups now make a special detour just to photograph the magnificent sparkle standoff. 34. In a Boston row house, a political flag war between a Blue Lives Matter flag and a Rainbow Progress Pride flag escalated dramatically. Soon, it wasn't about flags, but entire LED light shows covering their respective facades, one a pulsing police blue, the other a cascading rainbow waterfall. In a completely unexpected twist, the combined light show became the most popular spot in the city for flash mob marriage proposals, with both households getting toasted with free champagne on a weekly basis. Unity, achieved through staggering electricity bills. 35. In the deep woods of New Hampshire, an amateur blacksmith with a flair for the dramatic decided a public footpath crossed his property one too many times. He responded by blocking it with an ornate, hand-forged gate and a sign reading, "No Through Walkers." The local hiking club, however, viewed this not as a barrier but as a challenge. They forged dozens of tiny skeleton keys, hid them in geocaches along the trail, and posted the coordinates online. The footpath is now a treasure hunt, and Dungeon Core-themed tourism brochures are basically writing themselves. 36. A daily drama unfolded at a Miami condo pool where an influencer would commandeer the entire area for bikini photo shoots, banning all cannonballs for aesthetic reasons. The retired Navy vet living downstairs, a man not known for his appreciation of aesthetics, took matters into his own hands. He pumped the pool full of a vibrant, eco-friendly algae dye, turning the water a murky emerald green. But in a twist only possible in Miami, her hashtag Mermaid Swamp trended globally. Sponsorships flooded in, and the algae activist is now her full-time brand manager, proving you can monetize literally anything. 37. The pristine sidewalks of suburban Denver became a bizarre battleground of public art. One resident, claiming colorful chalk drawings of unicorns and hopscotch grids were lowering property values, began a campaign of intellectual warfare. Each morning, he would meticulously draw anatomically correct diagrams of internal organs over the chalk art, labeling them educational enhancement. While the other parents were left baffled and slightly horrified, their kids at least learned where the spleen is supposed to be. Probably. 38. An aromatic turf war broke out in Las Cruces when a chili farmer, proud of his signature roasted scent, was accused by the neighboring candle shop owner of olfactory terrorism against her pumpkin spice clientele. The candle maker retaliated by hiring a fragrance consultant to create a neutralizing aroma barrier with high-powered diffusers. The farmer responded by aiming 3 industrial fans directly at her storefront. This created a swirling vortex of savory heat and synthetic autumn over Main Street, causing confused tourists to suddenly crave spicy pumpkin lattes, a beverage that should not exist. 39. The unique soundscape of New Orleans produced an accidental masterpiece when a jazz trumpeter's sunrise practice sessions began clashing with the Gregorian chants from the funeral director next door. Instead of filing noise complaints, they created an unintentional mashup. A tourist recorded it. The track Jazz Requiem for a Tuesday Morning went viral on TikTok, and the resulting merchandise sales are now paying both of their mortgages. It's definitive proof that capitalism is sometimes cheaper than therapy. 40. Forget shuffleboard. Senior Formula One became the sport of choice in a St. Augustine retirement community. It began when 2 retirees souped up their mobility scooters with high-performance batteries. Soon, they were spray-painting lane lines on the sidewalks, using radar guns to clock lap times, and enlisting their friends as SPF 50-wielding pit crews. The Homeowners Association is trying to shut them down, but they're struggling to catch them. 41. In Maui, a yoga retreat host accused the neighboring luau caterers of polluting her clients' chakra bandwidth with tiki torch smoke. In retaliation, she began burning sandalwood incense so thick it would fog over the entire roast pig buffet next door. The result was a strange sort of harmony. Luau guests found themselves meditating over plates of pulled pork, simultaneously achieving inner peace and a bad case of indigestion. TripAdvisor reviews now call it a truly holistic heartburn experience. 42. Your tree is breathing my air was the central claim in a Houston small claims court case. A retiree, armed with laminated oxygen flowcharts, demanded $50,000 from his neighbor, claiming their massive oak tree was stealing his atmospheric rights. He argued that the tree was consuming a disproportionate amount of the neighborhood's oxygen. The judge, after a long pause, suggested he buy a rake. The retiree stormed out, muttering that it was time for NASA to intervene. 43. In Lexington, a bourbon collector claimed the neighbor's wedding DJ was ruining his expensive aging barrels with auditory turbulence from the bass. His revenge was brilliantly specific. He unleashed a bagpiper instructed to play notes that allegedly resonate with the angels share, the evaporating whiskey. While the newlyweds slow danced to what sounded like a robot cat dying, the collector stood on his porch, convinced he was helping his bourbon achieve a higher state of being through the power of pure, droning noise. 44. A man in Detroit, fed up with his neighbor's overgrown hedge, launched a campaign of Jurassic retaliation. He populated his front yard with a family of googly-eyed, inflatable dinosaurs, all staring judgmentally at the offending shrubbery. The hedge owner countered by placing several large, inflatable meteors on his own lawn, aimed directly at the dinosaurs. The prehistoric diorama became a local landmark, but the hedge remains untrimmed, and a plastic T-Rex continues its silent, unblinking vigil. 45. The magician's assistant rabbits in a Las Vegas suburb began their training at 5 a.m., their frantic exercise wheel pounding, echoing through the neighborhood. The neighbor, a night shift casino pit boss, retaliated by setting his truck's alarm to the sound of a progressive slot machine jackpot. Now, every morning begins with the sound of a massive payout, which sends the rabbits into a frenzy of spinning, conditioned to believe that the sound of faux riches means it's time to run. 46. In a Dallas cul-de-sac, one dad mounted a radar gun at the street entrance and began issuing handwritten speeding tickets to children on scooters who topped 3 miles per hour. One of the recipients, a 10-year-old future attorney, appealed every single citation with color-coded crayon-written footnotes. A mock trial was held on the driveway where the radar gun was ultimately impeached for lacking proper calibration credentials. The dad was forced to rescind all tickets. 47. A Tampa woman dialed 911 a staggering 62 times, hysterically claiming her upstairs neighbor's Roomba was mocking her in Morse code. She swore the robot's beeping patterns were telling her to clean thy life. Bemused officers eventually detained the robot for forensic audio analysis, which revealed the only message was low battery. It turns out the only judgment in the room was coming from her own echo chamber, and possibly her cat. 48. Two pyromaniac neighbors in rural Ohio, refusing to coordinate, scheduled identical 4th of July fireworks shows at the exact same time. Instead of merging into one glorious display, they offset their blast by milliseconds, unintentionally spelling out "send help" in Morse code against the night sky. The local sheriff posted the translations online, and the grand finale, which clearly spelled "oops," received a standing ovation from the fire chief. 49. A craft beer arms race in a San Diego neighborhood saw one house hosting IPA seances with devoted chanting of hop names, while the neighbor turned his hot tub into a heated porter-soaking experience. The local raccoon population, exposed to the runoff, developed unusually discerning palates. Animal control had to update their strategy, setting sobriety traps baited not with garbage, but with cheap store-brand lager, which the newly sophisticated raccoons now refuse to touch. After hearing these 49 tales of suburban madness, you're either feeling incredibly lucky or you're having some serious flashbacks. Every neighborhood has that one story, the local legend of petty warfare that people still whisper about at barbecues. We just gave you 49. Now it's your turn. Go to the comments and tell us the one absurd neighbor story from your town that we absolutely need to hear. Don't be shy. We know you've got one. If these stories gave you a new appreciation for a quiet life, show some love with the like button. And subscribe for more proof that reality is stranger than any script.